Hey, welcome back, Finxters. Let us have a look at how the web works, rather I should say, how the HTTP request response model works. We have a client which sends a request message to the web server, and then the web server responds with a response and sends it to the client. This means a client, which is typically a web browser, sends a request for a resource to a server, and the server sends back a response corresponding to the resource. A resource can be a number of things, such as a simple HTML file that is returned to the browser, or a program that generates the response dynamically. Now the diagram or the figure on the screen that you saw displays a very basic idea of the request response model. Now let us try and have a look at how the HTTP request looks like. So inside each HTTP request we have two main sections. One, the header, and the second is the request body. The request header stores metadata about the request. So in this case you can see we have metadata information like GET request, version of the HTTP protocol used, and so on. It is basically a block of key value pairs, as you can see on the screen, that contains necessary information about the request. Since we are asking for data, or we are trying to retrieve data from the server, so in this case we do not have anything within the body, thus it is empty. But if you want to send some data to the server, in that case the request body won't be empty. Now let us quickly have a look at how the HTTP response looks like. It also has two major sections, the first being the response header and the second is the response body. However, if you look closely, then you'll find that the response header contains a status code and a bunch of other information as attached by the server, and the body of the response contains the actual code for the website that we requested for. So suppose we requested for google.com. Then the HTML code for Google will be contained within the response body. Now I mentioned about a certain status code within the HTTP response header. So what is a status code? Status code is a response received by the server to a browser's request. When you key in a web address on the browser sends a request to that particular site's server. The server then responds to the browser with a 3-digit HTTP status code. In layman's terms, the HTTP response codes are the internet conversations between the browser and the respective server. Now, HTTP status codes are broadly divided into 4 groups, which are the 200 HTTP response code group. Then we have the 300 HTTP response code group. Similarly, we also have the 400 HTTP response code group. And finally, we have the 500 HTTP response code group. Now, whenever you get the 200 status code, it means that the request was successful. This is the ideal status code for normal functioning of the pages. Now the 300 series status codes indicate redirection. For example, the 301 status code indicates a permanent redirection. That means when a web page has been permanently replaced with a different resource, you will get a 301 status code. The 400 series status code indicates a client-side error. Now you might have often come across the 404 status code, which indicates page not found error. For example, if someone tries to access a certain web page of a website, however, that page does not exist, then the 404 status code will be displayed on the screen. The user will see this status code because even if the web server is functioning, the request for that particular page doesn't exist. Finally, we have the 500 series status codes, which indicate internal server error. For example, the 501 status code indicates that the web server does not recognize the request method and is incapable of supporting it. So that was all about status codes. Now before wrapping up this video, I want to touch upon a topic. The HTTP request types. Now as you can see on the screen, we majorly have the following 7 types of HTTP requests. However, the most commonly used requests are GET and POST. GET is used to request data from a specified resource in the server, while POST is used to send data to a server to create or update a resource. Now please feel free to research more on this topic on the internet, because this might prove to be quite helpful while dealing with web scraping. Now that was it for this video. If you have time, please join me in the next lesson where I will be discussing about HTML.